Hello, and welcome to tonight's God Talks with Reverend Goodwin. Tonight, I'm going to be interviewing Kiantha Duncan. I've known Kiantha for over 10 years, and when I think about the saying, Black girls rock, I immediately think of her. From not only her work in philanthropy, for her work with Seattle Black Pride, to the fact that she worked for Dress for Success, she's worked for many, many different agencies who are working with helping our community, and especially those who are marginalized or people who have been minoritized. If you don't know how much she rocks, I'm going to show you just a quick video of Kiantha and her TED Talk most recently in Spokane. Join me in this beginning God Talks.
Okay, so I am a perfect 10. You guys are like, no, I don't know about 10, but I do mean a perfect 10 literally. Like, I am not a Bo Derek perfect 10, but I'm a 10. So not really a beauty pageant perfect 10 either, and definitely not a size 10, right? But what I am is 10 because I have 10 aces. Does anybody in here know what aces are? Okay. Well, if you do or if you don't, I'm going to tell you in a minute. So, ACEs are adverse childhood experiences, and they are all traumatic, and they have all been experienced by the age of 18. So, let me tell you a little bit about those adverse experiences and what they are: physical, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, physical and emotional trauma. It is having a parent.
Kiantha, welcome to God Talks. So that was just another snippet again of Kiantha's TED Talk. Kiantha, tell us the name of the TED Talk so folks can search it and watch your entire TED Talk, specifically talking about how you are a 10. I personally think that you're a 10, but where might we be able to find the full version of your TED?
Absolutely. So you want to look on the TED Talks. You can find them on YouTube. And the title of the TED Talk is A Perfect 10.
You can't miss that, folks. A perfect 10. So, Kiantha, we're going to just jump right into it. I told folks a little bit about how awesome I think you are in terms of all of the work you've done for our community. But let's start with this very simple question. How might one of your closest friends describe you? So, not using necessarily the things in your bio, but just how you think one of your closest friends might talk about you.
Well, I'll give you what closest friends have said to me. How about that? So this is
That'll
not
work.
what I think. This is not what I think. This is what I know. My friends have said that I am a lunatic. A lunatic in that I have the most ambitious, lofty goals and desires and thoughts, and then I'll go after it. I'll go after it, and I will do what it takes to actualize those goals. And so I think they would think that I'm extremely brave, a nutcase for some of the things that I attempt to pull off. I think my friends would also say that I am a big heart, but an even bigger personality.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think that actually the lunatic part and the big heart ties into the next question that I have for you. Talk about what you would say is your personal vision and mission. I mean, another way to think about it is, what is Kiantha's mission statement? So this lunatic who has a giant heart, who's done all of these things, how would you describe your personal mission statement?
Well, I'll tell you first, it has changed over the years. It's changed a number of times. If you would have asked me 20 years ago what my mission was at that time, it probably would have been advocating for LGBTQ rights and doing advocacy work around that. Over the years, that, like I said, that's changed. Right now, what I would say my mission is, and uh, what most defines how I move, is my desire to really create what I call soulful leadership model.
Mhm.
And that soulful leadership is, and I can explain it now, or I can talk about it a little
Oh,
bit
go
later. But
into it now. You already, I'm good.
okay,
Soulful
well
leadership.
let's
Go
do it.
ahead.
Let's do it. Let me give you an analogy that I recently gave at a talk that I did at the University of Washington, or Eastern Washington University, one of them. And I was talking to a group of graduating seniors and professors within the university system about soulful leadership. And so I gave them the example of being, I said, all of us in this room, let's consider that we all work for a giant cookie manufacturer. And
Mhm.
I am the CEO of the cookie manufacturer, and you all are the employees, whether that be management level employees, first line level employees, salesmen, whatever your role is within the company. But the company clearly has a goal in mind in terms of income and the amount of money that of revenue that we can bring in to the organization. Most corporations are guided simply by financial resources. So they're guided by how much can we make, how much can we save, how lean can we do our business. And what I am proposing is that we use this model that I've created called soulful leadership, which says essentially don't go out and sell the cookies, although we have a cookie quota, don't go sell them to diabetic people. Don't
Mm.
go push them there. That's not the place. Don't go to a place where you know there is a population of people who are living beneath the poverty line and make that your sales arena. You don't do
Mm.
stuff like that. So it's a matter of doing business, but doing it from a place that is connected to not just your mental, but it's also connected to your soul. And your soul doesn't allow you to do poor business practices or mistreat customers for a profit. You're not able to do those kinds of things. So that's just one example of how that soulful leadership would come up. Another really relevant example that I saw recently that I thought, oh, that's what I mean. That's another example of soulful leadership. There was some conversation about 2 weeks ago during this COVID pandemic. The state of Georgia was going to open back up, and one of the rappers in Georgia has a number of barbershops.
Mm.
And I believe his name is Big Mike, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, so he said he did a press release essentially saying, "Look, I of course I want the money. You know, you're in business for profit, so I want the money, and this, of course, is hurting my bottom line by having my shops closed. But I will not open up, prior to when really scientists are saying it's safe to open up. I won't do that because I will not use my desire to get money to override my soulful leadership, which says this is not the right thing to do." And so, there's so many examples of what I believe people are already doing. It's just not, there's not a name to it. And there's more people who are not practicing soulful leadership.
I think you might have just coined. I'm waiting for that book, Soulful
I'm
Leadership.
writing it.
And so remember, folks, you've heard about soulful leadership first on God Talks.
That's right.
Kiantha, my next question actually really ties into this soulful leadership. How do you think faith, however you define faith, has informed this understanding of your vision and mission, and particularly soulful leadership?
Well, I'll tell you, for me, I think that faith, and when I say faith, I am really, please make sure that this is not religion that we're talking about. This is not religion. What I'm talking about is your spiritual beliefs. Well, so when I say faith, I'm talking about the things spiritually that guide you,
Mhm.
your North Star, your spiritual North Star. That is what I think needs to lead everybody in business. And for me, because I grew up in the church, and worked in the church and have lots of experience and a very close relationship with God myself, I think that is what allows me to be careful in the way that I provide leadership for any organization or corporation that I work for.
Thank you. That's a really good framing. And I think you tie into part of this whole point of God Talks is to give people a lens whereby which to describe their own understanding of faith and spirituality. And there isn't a particular cookie cutter model. I want to poke you just a little bit further on,
Yes.
on another version of sort of the soulful leadership, this maybe out of the box understanding of your own spirituality. Kiantha, what are you in love with right now? What's occupying your heart? What's occupying your sense of spirit? So soulful leadership might be a part of that, but what's kind of the thing that gets you up in the morning right now?
What I'm in love with is humanity. I'm in love with the presence of humanity, and I'm also in love with what I understand is probably a very romanticized view of humanity. Because the truth is, it doesn't all work together perfectly, and we don't all look out for each other. And this isn't a society that says you are important and you are important. We don't live in that society. So in my mind, there is this romantic land that I function within. And in this romantic space is a space that I am able to think about others in as much as I'm able to think about myself, and everybody else does that too. So it's like, even if I don't put my best interest first, I don't have to worry about it because somebody else is. Someone else is thinking of me, because it's a chain, and all of us are doing it. All of us are thinking about the next person. So that's kind of what wakes me up right now, is really wanting to work towards this creating this world that I believe is possible, that I've never seen. I've never seen it. It doesn't exist. I've done community work in a number of different cities for over 20 years. And what I can say is many of the communities have similar issues. There's nothing new under the sun. So, communities deal with kind of the same stuff. But what I am learning is that there really is no community that functions holistically the way that it could. And so I wake up to see that happen, and to figure out ways to be a part of making that happen.
So I'm sitting here with a woman who did a TED talk about having some really hard experiences as a child. And I hear you saying that we don't actually live in a world where you've really seen the type of social justice and care and lifting up those who are least and the last and pushed to the side occur. And yet, this is in effect what I think you've dedicated a part of your life to. So if it's a world you haven't seen, what happened in the life of this little girl that was the seed to the woman that you are now? And I'd love to hear, was there an image of God that was a part of this little girl's journey that's shaping this woman who's trying to create a world she hasn't seen?
Well, yeah, of course. There was an image of God, but I'll tell you, the image that probably shaped most of my um, career, and just not even just career, because it's not just about who you are professionally, it's really who are you as a person. So most of how I would describe the God that shaped that was very rigid. It is not the same God or same religious beliefs that I subscribe to today.
Mm.
It was one of fear and condemnation. So everything you did, you're doing it to try not to go to hell, or trying not to be a backslidden Christian, or whatever that is. And so, that's not really the God that exists in the world that I believe in and that I function within. um so that is a little bit different than it was. In terms of what was it that made me believe this world was possible, I really honestly feel like it's been the things that I didn't get. I knew I wanted them. So I believe that other people want them too. Everybody wants to feel loved. Everybody wants to feel accepted. Everybody wants to feel valued. And as a child who had experienced a lot of trauma, many times those were the things that I did not feel. So I
Mhm.
didn't feel it, I didn't see it, I didn't have it. So then I wanted to create a world in which that existed. That was the motor for my world. So it came from a place of trauma, honestly.
So most people might describe that though that their faith experience was strict and it had all of these guidelines, they might say, but it saved me. It sort of gave me the structure that provided the stepping stones. How do you respond to that? That this sort of kind of the faith journey, the faith life you described for this little girl, did it help you? Is it a part of what helped to shape who you are?
It is a part of, yeah, absolutely. It shaped who I am, because without that, I would not have known the contrast to it.
Mm.
So I had to experience that rigidity, that, very conventional way of looking at spirituality and at looking at God. I had to experience that in order to know that wasn't the thing I wanted to be experiencing. So yeah, it definitely helped. But I believe this happens in the lives of every person who is a believer or who connects with their own spirituality. I think what happens is there is this and that. So yes, it was rigid. Yes, it may have been damaging in some ways, but yes, there are times when I know when something's wrong, I know where to go and how to get to it. I know how to access that God because of that rigid religious structure that I was involved in. So I think that it's both things for all people, really. It's both things, yeah.
So I still want to talk a little bit more about this um, girl version of Kiantha,
Yes.
who I
He was
believe,
off the chain, by the way.
and I would imagine there was a level of resiliency in this little girl that's still a part of shaping the narrative today. So tell me about that little girl's an early image she had or an early experience with God.
Yeah. So I will say, uh, I don't remember the age. And this is something that for people who have experienced a lot of trauma in their life, the timelines start to get a little funky. So it's not as easy as saying, oh, that happened when I was 9 on, April 9th. It doesn't work that way. So I can just say it was a time frame. I remember at a very early age feeling like there was something that was holding me, moving me, guiding my experiences that was way bigger than me. It was bigger than me. It was bigger than my mother. It was bigger than my grandmother. It was bigger than the city I lived in. It wasn't a person. It was something humongous. And at the time, I didn't know that it was God. I had no idea that that's what it was. It just was a presence that I felt and that I felt since I was a young girl.
Mm. So this big, almost too big version of God, but yet I hear some level of comfort, some structure and strictness, but
Yes.
a foundational point. When did that either change or expand? And maybe a story or some imagery for your life of how that shift occurred from that image to this God that doesn't seem to be bound by the same constraints, doesn't maybe have the same rules as you were describing. When did that start to happen and why?
I believe it happened because I started to look at every piece of my world critically.
Mm.
I got brave enough to actually examine every piece of my world, every thought in my mind, to look at it critically and say, okay, does this actually make sense? Does this make sense? Or is this something that I've subscribed to because somebody else told me? And as long as I have remained open enough to keep asking the questions, keep digging deeper, then I think I eventually just continue to evolve in this bigger understanding of God because I'm steady asking the questions.
So, where does a person who's had the life experience that you've had, where does a little black girl in America find bravery?
Mm, that that's an amazing question. I don't. This may even my answer is probably going to be a bit controversial too. I don't think you find bravery. I think that those things are in you already.
Mm.
You are either in tuned enough with yourself that you tap into it without even knowing what you're tapping into, but it's already there. You can't there's no experience that you can go out and have that makes you brave. If you think about a person going skydiving, right? You would think, oh, well, that takes bravery to go skydiving. You have to get up in the plane, you got to suit up, and then you got to be willing to jump. Well, you're brave before you do it though. You're brave when the thought is in your mind, when the thought is in your spirit that is something that you want to do. When the desire is there, that is the bravery is already there before you do the action. So I don't know where a person would go to get bravery. I think we all just have it already. We just choose to access it or we don't.
So, how did you access it? Because if there isn't a system, there's no podcast or maybe a
No,
book. If
no.
it's in you, what for Kiantha, what was it that helped you to access that bravery and resilience?
It was God.
Mm.
It was God completely. It was God being so big in my conscious and subconscious that God was actually guiding me the whole time. So I didn't have to access it. I didn't have to find my way. God just ever so gently turned me each time to get to where I needed to be to. Because there are some situations that really looking back over the years, I cannot explain. I just don't have the words to explain how this particular thing happened or that thing happened or how I got to that place, other than God has been like the guiding force for everything. Everything. And it was before I was an adult. It was as a child. It was as a child. And I think the other thing is some people are naturally able to go inward. And when you can naturally do that, then that's where you hear from God the most. It's in that your ability to be so connected that there is intuitive relationship between you and God. And I felt that as a kid.
Mm.
Yeah.
You said something that struck me. A strict upbringing in church doesn't translate to questioning.
No.
Yet, you said that part of the push for you, part of the unraveling for you, was when you started to do two key words: think critically, but then also question.
Mm-hmm.
Where did you get that from? And for people who are trying to navigate their own faith, but they've been told do not question because somehow your faith crumbles under that.
Yeah.
Where did that come from?
I don't. I would say my dad. This is what my dad said to me. He's actually told me this recently. He said, "Kiantha, when you were a little girl, like 3, right, 4, and I couldn't just tell you to do something. I couldn't say go sit down because you always wanted to know, like, okay, I'll go sit down, but why do I need to go sit down? What's over there? Why is sitting down better than standing up? Why should I do that?" And that I needed to have some explanation and understanding. Without, like, I just couldn't be a follower of anything. Not
Mm,
even a parental figure. Like, no, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying help me understand why you're right. And
mm.
it is in that critical thinking that the same thing happened in terms of spirituality and religion and my belief around God, is that I had to say, I'm not saying that's wrong, but
We're going to take just a moment to I think whatever I asked Kiantha has her so deep in thought that she's pausing for just a minute. I want you to also be thinking about these questions and how they're impacting you. When you were a child, what was your image of God like? If what you believe now is somehow contradictory to where you've been, then what does that look like now? What has encouraged you along the way? Maybe you had a faith narrative and now somehow it's dissipated because you were trying to fit who you are and who you felt created to be inside of some form of a little box. You too have the ability, as I think Kiantha is sharing with us, to author your own journey, to create a new understanding of who the divine or spirituality is to you. One of the things I really appreciated is Kiantha focusing on this really simple fact of it was when she discerned to question, when she started to ask the deeper and the bigger questions about who she was and maybe who this image was, that something transformed. I think Kiantha's back, so I'm gonna pull her back in. Welcome back. I
thank
said,
you.
look, you were so deep in thought about that questioning that you had to freeze in the midst of it. I was sharing with folks who are joining us that really you are providing this introduction, this invitation for us, no matter of how that faith journey was curated, that we each have the ability to question. We have the ability to push a little bit. So I'm going to let you keep talking about, again, what gave you permission to question maybe when your faith told you you shouldn't.
Well, here's the other thing I think, and this is so simple. I wish that I could make it very complicated, because if I could complicate this process, then I'll write some long, complicated books and people will buy them, and you get rich that way. But it's really this simple ability to accept the magnitude that is God, right? If you can accept the magnitude that is God, then you will naturally have questions. You will naturally want to know more. It'll naturally make you say, well, why? But how is God able to do this? Or who did this? If it wasn't God, how could it be done? I had an experience, this was several months ago. I was walking past a big plant. I have a lot of plants in my house. And I was walking past this huge plant. And as I walked past, my arm brushed the plant. And I felt something wet on my arm. But my arm only brushed the tip of one of the leaves of the plant. So I immediately, because our minds want to dismiss something so grand and beautiful and simple, we can dismiss it easily. So I looked up at the ceiling, like, is my house leaking? What is going on? Where did the water come from? And I looked down after, of course, realizing the ceiling's not leaking. I looked at this plant and I saw how, and it was so amazing. This is really amazing. I want people to try this if they have a plant at home. Look at it, look into it. So this plant had water on the very tip of each leaf in the plant. Each leaf in the plant had water on the tip, although you only water the soil of a plant. So there is some system, there is some being, something that is so big and complex that when I put the water in the soil, this God, what I believe it is, cares so much about everything on this earth, including plants, that God made sure that the water from the soil would get up to every single little corner of a leaf. Now, if you don't question how that happened, I don't know who wouldn't question how did that happen? How did that happen? And if you could allow yourself to believe that God is so big that he could create he or she or whatever you want God to be, can create a system so big and complicated, you cannot think that the little things we deal with in our world is really anything bigger than a drop of water on a leaf. He can handle that too. So it's like these very simple situations allow me to think critically about what God is and how God actually shows up in not just my life, but everybody's lives, even the lives of non-believers. Boom. Drop the mic on that.
Speaking of a mic, I don't know, maybe it's something because I have the collar on and all that, but did you want to be a preacher? Because that'll preach. You might be able to preach. Don't be shocked if you are watching Facebook Live and I'm preaching about the drop of water that's God on your leaf. Anyway, that made me think about something. I want to go back to a couple of other things you said, because I think it's language that some of us might be comfortable with, but for someone who is exploring their understanding of the divine of God, they may be wanting to dig a little bit more deeper. So you said that there were moments where you felt that God was guiding you.
Mm-hmm.
What does that look like? This big image of God, this God that allows you to question, this God that can be he or she or just God. How does that God guide little Kiantha?
Okay, that is an amazing question. And here is the simplest way that I can put that. So as a child, having experienced that kind of trauma, I was essentially in danger most of my life. Most of my childhood, I was in danger. The trauma was related to something that was not healthy, something that was harmful, and something that was dangerous for a child to be involved in. even in that danger, though, I always felt protected in a weird way. Like I could still, there was something in me that would say, don't go in that direction. Do go in this direction. Don't say anything to that person. Don't trust what that person is saying. Trust what this person is saying. There was something that was happening. And I think that was God. That was God showing up in that little girl's life in a way that ultimately just evolves into something even greater as you grow older. But it was, again, it was through the trauma. It was through the dang on trauma. I almost cussed on your show. It was through the trauma.
So I'm sitting at home, I'm watching this, and I was nervous about watching it, right? Because is this going to be some preachy thing? Is it going to be some rhetoric?
Boring.
Just another little pull in? And I'm reflecting on my life and thinking about the things that have been hard. And I just heard this woman say, but God protected her. And I don't know if I've ever been protected.
Mm-hmm.
What do you say to that? What can you say based on your experience? Because I didn't hear you say you didn't have any trauma or there wasn't any sort of pain.
Tons. Mm-hmm.
How was God protecting you? Unpack that in the middle of pain and struggle. And
yes, here is another simple one. I need to make this complicated so I can write 20 chapters about it, but it's simple. It really is like a 2-page chapter because it's so simple. Even through all of the trauma that any person could be experiencing, because my situation is not unique. I learned that too along the way. It felt unique to me because it was only happening to me because that's all I could see. But actually, anything that has happened to anyone negative has also happened to a whole bunch of other people, right? Simultaneously in different states, in different countries, people are suffering all the time, and our suffering is many times connected. So here is what I would say if a person wanted to know, well, I don't know if I don't know if I felt protected. I would say, yeah, you might have not felt protected, but aren't you here at this moment today to have this conversation or to watch this or to even think critically about it, to evaluate it? How did you get here? How did you get here? With all that crazy stuff that happened in your life, how did you get to this point? You could only get to this point because something bigger than you was protecting you and guiding your steps. That's not to say that it didn't never let you scratch your leg. When we learn how to ride a bike, all of us fall. We all fail because that's part of learning. So you're going to you'll experience the hurt, the trauma, the things that have happened. But even in those experiences, something allowed you to get right here. So how do you now think critically and say, well, how did I make it through abuse? Or how did I make it through a drug addiction or whatever people deal with? How did I get through that? And you'll see that it's simple. It's bigger than you. God provided that road for you, and God protected you to get you here today, to understand that he got you to today.
Wow. Thank you. It makes me think about another line you said earlier, which that there were not only times that God was guiding you, you've added to the guidance protection. Mm-hmm. But then you said something very curious that I'm gonna need you to unpack. Okay. You said you heard from God, that God spoke to you. How? Was this a big booming voice? Was it through a text? Was it through some sermon? How did Kiantha hear God?
Listen, you get an A+ for asking questions, okay? Because these are great questions. How did I hear God? I don't even know that it was an audible thing. I don't know that I heard God. So I can't, thinking back, I don't feel like there was ever a time where I heard this spooky voice like, Kiantha, you should do this. Not like that. I think I felt God. I felt God. All along, I felt God. And I think we all do. We all feel God, which is why when we do something that we ain't got no business doing, we feel that. Nobody has to say, you shouldn't have did that. There's something in you that says you shouldn't have did that. When you do something good or you are helpful to someone else, that feeling of Oh, that felt good to me. That's God. That's God saying, you're right. It felt good because it was good, because this is good. Do good. You know, and it's not about hearing anything. It's about feeling. And that again goes back to soulful leadership. Soulful leadership has to involve your soul and what you feel. It involves every core part of you, not just your thinking. So it's not just information that you can learn through a business degree. It's not just that. It's what you learn when you bring all of the pieces, including your spirituality, your soul, your core beliefs. When you bring all of that together, that is what that's the formula that allows you to do soulful leadership.
Earlier, you mentioned failure,
Okay.
and you said that each of us has a failure, or we may nick ourselves, or we may stumble, and that the stumbling and the failure isn't a sign that God was not yet protecting us. So, Miss Duncan, tell us
Yes.
about a time you failed, and where was your God in the midst of that failure?
Oh my gosh. Let me tell you a place that I failed that I don't think most people would talk about, but I told you earlier that people think I'm a lunatic. So I'll talk about it. The way in which I showed up. So when I decided to finally just allow myself to show up in the world in the way that I actually was, which was as a lesbian woman, when that time happened, so as I was coming out and stuff, I had probably the biggest failure of my life in the way in which I interacted with relationships.
Mm,
Big fail, capital fail. Uh, and it wasn't until I started to really get honest and accepting of the space that I hold in the world. That's not that until then, I was never gonna get the relationship stuff right.
mm,
So I was going to fail over and over again until I started realizing that my words actually mean something. That the
mm,
space that God created for me is so big that it impacts other people in really deep ways. And that I have to know that. I have to know that. And I have to remember that in every area of my life, including romantic relationships.
mm.
So I would say that was a failure of mine for many years, because that it took a long time to get to that. Because let me tell you, relationships for me, it was about Kiantha's way or the highway,
Mm.
freeway, express lane, the express lane. It is.
Has that really changed? I mean, is that different?
Yes, it has a little bit. Look, now it's the HOV. It's not, yeah, it has changed because now I just understand myself differently. So as I began to really go deeper into that questioning everything, um, I started to question, like, yeah, who are you? What does that mean? How you showing up? What does that mean? And where's that coming from? And once you think critically about those things, and all you have to do is critically ask the question in your mind. You don't have to ask it out loud to anybody else. Ask it in a way that only you can hear, because you're talking to God. And so when you ask the question, God's going to give you an answer. He'll tell you
Mm,
every time.
mm.
Hmm.
I think that's all something that we can learn and grow from, which introduces my next question for you, Kiantha. Um, one assumes that maybe our image of the divine changes over time through some of the experiences you have named, growth and relationship, maybe even just our maturation in age. Um, what is your relationship with the divine like today?
Listen, I'm so happy. This is, I'm gonna tell you what the relationship is like today, but I want to give you a caveat first. I'm so happy my grandmother, who raised me, um, for the most part, off and on when I wasn't in foster care. I'm so happy that she died 4 years ago. Now, I'm not happy because she's dead, because it was devastating for me to lose my grandmother. Devastating, because I felt like she was the one thing that was a constant connection. It was a constant for me. That's what she was. But let me tell you, I'm so glad she dead, so she ain't got to hear what I'm about to tell you. Because she would not be able to handle this. It pushes against everything that she believed in terms of her own faith and everything that she thought. What I know now, what my relationship with God is like now, is I would say we have a great relationship now, because I recognize what all God is. And I don't think that my grandmother and her generation, I don't think they could recognize what all God was, because the confines of their religion really put God into these little spaces and boxes, whereas I don't have those beliefs. So, you know, that probably just made my grandma turn over in her grave right now. But yeah, it really is different. It's a friendship. I was never friends with God. One, because I ain't hardly like God, because God really was mean. The God that you hear about in religion, that you learn about, is mean as F, as the kids say. Very mean, very strict, very condemning, very angry, and then very loving, but then fine print loving. The other things are so much bigger, right? So the guy that I'm friends with, my homie, we don't function that way. We don't function that way. God doesn't sit and get pleasure from watching me struggle or punishing me for wrong or like that. God's not a gamer. God's not a gamer. The God of my grandmother, the spirituality of my grandmother and her generation, and so many people like her, their God played hella games. Hella games. I don't. We don't do that. We don't do that.
So I imagine your grandmother was a significant figure in your life, and in many ways, she helped to shape the resilient woman you are now. How do you hold what was so dear to her with what is now a friend relationship with God today? I mean, are they?
That's why I said I'm glad she did, because I wouldn't have been able to do it. I would not have been able to do it. I would not have. And this is so true. 4 years. So she died 4 years ago, but let's go back like 6 years. 6 years ago, I would not have been able to look at my grandmother and say, "Honey," because I called my grandmother all kinds of nicknames, but I would not have been able to say, "Honey, girl, that is, yeah, no, that's not God," because that would have felt to her like a attack of the most disrespectful kind. So I couldn't do that. So this had to happen. I had to evolve to this point, but it had to be post her passing. That was not something that we would have been able to reconcile.
A few years ago, I gave my grandmother this DVD called "For the Bible Tells Me So."
I remember that.
It was a wonderful DVD, talking about scripture and sexuality. And I came home and I remember asking my grandmother, "What'd you think?" And she said, "Oh, it was okay." I said, "No, but what did you think?" And I kept pressing, and she finally answered these simple words: "If I believe the things in that video, I will have to throw away all of my faith." And at the time, my grandmother was about 77. Someone is watching this, listening to you, listening to your grandmother, and they're thinking, in order to have a relationship with the divine in the way that this woman is describing, this out of the box, like God is your protector and walking alongside you, I have to throw away the faith of my foreparents. What do you say to that? Are we throwing our grandmas and granddads and great grandmas and Medea?
No. We can't throw them away. At the same time, the way that our mothers, grandmothers, relatives, the way that they understand God, let's use the analogy of medication, right? If that was their prescription, that was how it needed to be prescribed for them. You can't take that prescription because it wasn't prescribed for you. If there's something in your heart and in your mind that's saying no, it's something different, then don't you take that particular medication because it's not, it wasn't prescribed for you. You have to take what's prescribed for you and your ailments. And so that old way of dogmatic religious uh, practice is, that they're not even prescribing that stuff no more because that killed a bunch of people.
So I'm not here to market any particular thing. I do want you to know that in the United Church of Christ, we have a thing called multiple pathways to ministry. You don't necessarily have to go to seminary. You can just feel a call from God and have done some great community work, and we will walk you through an ordination process. That was just a little plug. If you're interested, DM me. I can tell you about it. Number two, folks, I feel like anything shared on God Talks is open to the public. That's the second sermon. I'm preaching about don't take somebody else's prescription. I love it. On the note of prescription, this friend that God is to you now, how do you stoke the fire of that relationship? How do you keep it changing and growing and being different and not stale?
Because I keep checking in on how I'm doing, which is what we should all be doing that in relationships. It's even with God. You got to keep going inward and again going to your soul, into your deepest place of beliefs, and saying, "How am I doing? How am I doing? Are you pleased with my behavior? Am I hurting you in some way? Am I showing up the best that I can for you?" And I'm saying that although we do that in physical relationships, we've got to do that in relationship with God too. Because then if you do that, you say, well, God, is my action, my daily actions, are they offensive to you? Am I hurting someone? Am I hurting you? Or am I representing you? Like, those are the things that you get to ask God when you are in an active relationship, an active friendship. You get to say, am I on the right path? Am I saying the right thing? Am I going the right way? Is this good for you? You good? We good? You get to say that too.
What I feel like I hear you saying is that our relationship with the divine isn't one-sided, but it's actually a conversation. Are you suggesting that we might be able to have an ongoing conversation with the divine, sister?
I'm suggesting that if you cannot have an ongoing conversation with the divine, your divine is dead.
All right. I appreciate that. We're almost coming to our time, but I have a couple of more questions. And then I want to throw one that you may be anticipating, but maybe not.
I'm not. I don't know what.
One of my closing questions for you is, we're going through a pandemic, and we know it's going to go on for a number of months, and we don't see an immediate end date. Where are you currently seeing this friend God that you have active in our world right now?
But I got another analogy for you because I'm the queen of analogies. Your majesty of analogies. Okay, my son is 29. But I remember when he was learning how to ride a bike, I helped him. So I would literally stand behind the bike with my hand on the two little handlebars, pushing him along the way, letting him pedal and move the bike at his own comfort and speed. And then eventually I had to let go of the bike so that he could move the bike all himself and he could figure out his balance and all that good stuff. This is my very unorthodox belief about what and where God is during this pandemic. everything that is happening as a result of COVID-19 is all our fault. It has nothing to do with God.
Mm.
Has nothing to do with God. And that is one way in which I really get so annoyed that people are not able to accept responsibility for their actions. And it's easier to say, God allowed this or God did this. No, fools, we did this. We didn't take care of our planet. We did this. We never, ever as a society, we've never made everyone's health equally as important. We've never done that. Because we've said, well, if you got money to pay for it, then yeah, your health is important because then you have access to health care. But if you don't, if you're just in some third world country, oh yeah, cool on you. We caused all of this. We caused all of this by not caring for our planet, by not caring for mankind, by not caring for communities, by not caring for our states, by not caring for our country, and by not caring for our world. God is just let that he because I say he because my grandma, but God has just taken, in my opinion, sort of just taken the hands off the handlebar a little bit to let us move forward. And as we move forward, because we didn't do right, we didn't learn right, we didn't listen right. That's why we fail. Because our entire COVID-19 has shown that our entire world has fallen. Every part of it. There is no part, there is no person, there is no community that is not impacted by this pandemic. None. But it's not anybody's fault but ours. And so until we can say, you know what, this ain't gonna take God to fix. We gotta fix this. Get up. We need to get up and do the right thing. That's what's gonna fix this. It's not God coming back and enlightening and eradicating the world from this disease. None of that's gonna happen. This will only be repaired if every single person is invested in the repair. That's the only way this is going to get fixed.
Every single person invested in the repair. Mm-hmm. I like that invitation. So the invitation I have for you is for folks who've been with us now and they've heard parts of your story, but I'm sure they want to either see the book, email you. You probably get a bunch of Facebook invites and emails for people who want to hear more. Kiantha, if you were to think about many of the things that you've said, but just your life, for a person who's truly seeking right now, they're trying to make some form of meaning. What life wisdom, my sister, might you offer?
Again, it's so simple. It's so simple. Stop looking. Stop looking. Stop seeking. Stop trying to find something and sit your ass down. Get still. Get still. Everything you need is already inside of you because God is inside of you. So it's already there. All the stuff, all the ingredients, all the formulas is already there. So sometimes we get so caught up in like frantically trying to find something that you don't even realize that what you're looking for, you hold on to already. Like the old ladies who they say, where my glasses at? Where is somebody see my glasses? And the glasses be on their head. They done pulled them up. We already got it. We already have the glasses. We already have the stuff. We have the antidote. We have the prescription. We have the solution. We already have it all of it, because God already had it. God didn't make mistakes. God doesn't make mistakes. God doesn't go to sleep. He didn't go to sleep and allow this pandemic to happen. God is wide awake, saying, what you fools gonna do now? Now y'all see what y'all done did. Now go ahead and clean that up. Because I'm also not your God babysitter. You got to clean up after yourself. Clean up after yourself. So that's how it's gonna change.
That's great wisdom. My final question for you is there something that I should have asked you on God Talks that I did not ask? And of course, I'd like you to answer it, but it's just something that I didn't ask.
I don't think it's a no. I think your questions were great, actually, and I'm so happy that you didn't provide the questions ahead of time. People don't need the questions ahead of time because you don't need to study it. What's in your heart? What do you really believe? Because whatever you really believe, you already know it. So you don't need to prepare for that. What I would say is probably going to be helpful for everybody to posit to the viewers, though, is God talks implies that, again, there is an audible thing that is going to happen. God doesn't just use audible language. That's just one way of communicating. That's one way. But God is able to communicate with us through our senses, through our sensory. There's so many other ways. So don't sit like waiting for the voice. Don't like, I'm listening for something. That's not what it is. So God talking could be verbally, but it could also be through your senses. It can be through your soul. It can be God talks to us in the plants, in the insects, through animals, in all kinds of ways. So be open to that. Be open to, after hearing from all of the people who will present in this God Talk series, be open to understanding that there's a whole bunch of different love languages when it comes to God. And audible is just one.
Man. Kiantha, I want to thank you so much. For our viewers, many of the God Talk speakers, when they were invited to be a part of this, not one of them, at least so far, has asked what their financial remuneration might be or how much this series was going to be able to provide them with some sort of financial blessing. But each presenter has presented to us an interest that they have, a particular charity or nonprofit that they're interested in. Kiantha is providing us with some information about the YWCA in Spokane. And so you're going to see at the bottom of the screen a way to go and donate to that organization. But Kiantha, might you share just a little bit about why the YWCA Spokane is important to you?
Absolutely. So the YWCA nationwide, so this is a national organization, and the Spokane chapter is the one in which I interact with now in my city. But I've worked with YWCA in other cities and states as well. The services that the YWCA provide are so critical because they primarily support women and children. They primarily support women and children, and they primarily support women and children who are homeless or who have been impacted by domestic violence. Here is why that is such an organization that is so close to my heart, and why I beg literally people to support this organization. It goes back to this whole, all of us have to see everyone's health, well-being, and safety as our problem. It is my problem. If a woman and her children are without housing, if they're being abused, if they're being traumatized, even if I don't know her, her story is still my problem. So in every way, I need to be doing something that's going to make her life a little better. Because when I look out for her, she looks out for her kids. She looks out for her family. The kids grow up a little healthier. They look out for their friends. They show up better in community. So to me, this is an organization that allows you to really make an investment that has a ripple effect.
Thank you, folks. Again, Kiantha supports the YWCA Spokane, so you can too. Kiantha, one of the ways we're going to end each of these God Talks is me offering a blessing of some kind, or a prayer, or a word of affirmation. So here's the affirmation that I want to offer you. What I heard tonight is that there was a little girl who had a hard life, who experienced some things that a little girl probably should not have experienced during that time. But in the midst of even the hard moments, you were developing a friendship with the divine. And that friendship that you've developed with the divine has planted in you a light that not only unleashes your own shackles, but it actually tears apart the barriers that other people who you will encounter have experienced. My encouragement to you is continue to be a chain breaker, and everything that you do and every place that you find yourself, allow the testimony that is planted on the inside of you to be as loud and as bright and maybe as a little crazy as you described earlier as it can be, because in your liberation, there are so many other folks who are bound and who will hear your story of liberation, and they, my sister, will also be free. So I love you. I thank God for you. I thank you for sharing your truth here at God Talks. For those of you who want to follow Kiantha, find her online. You can find her on Facebook. You can find her on YouTube. Just search the name Kiantha Duncan and many, many things will come up. And again, I encourage you to watch her TED Talks, because I think for many of us, with what we've experienced in this world, it will not only be healing, but it will be encouraging. So Kiantha, thank you again. And for everyone who's watched our God Talks, we look forward to you checking us out again next Monday at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. Be blessed.
Thank you.